This is the DotKids Child Online Safety, really a conversation with the APrIGF community, as well as all those who are joining us online. We really are looking at the newly launched DotKids. It really is an internet space, kind of kids is really for all things kids. And I really want to make sure people understand, why are we talking about this? Why are we so concerned? How we should be concerned? And what are the framing and guiding principles underpinning the space? And we'll be hearing from our esteemed guests who will be speaking to you a little bit later as well. And then we'll be opening the floor to the audience in our room as well as online for any questions you have, any suggestions you have. We really want to hear from you. Any questions you have about, creating a safe space for children online, as well as anything you might hear from our speakers. So maybe just a quick introduction to what DotKids is. Does anybody know what a top-level domain is? Anybody in the audience? Nobody in the audience knows what it is. Why are we here at IGF? Why are we here at APrIGF when we don't know what that is? So to the right of the dot, the top level domain, like .com, .org, .net, .asia, and .kids. And why is it so important for .kids to have more protection and more stringent policies looking at content? Because this is an internet space that we are hoping it is for children, by children, and it needs to be a safe space for them to explore, to learn, to grow, without being exposed to some more unsavory content on the internet that probably is in other namespaces, in other places, other platforms as well. So that is really what underlies DotKids. I don't think the clicker is working, so next, please. So really talking about the mission and vision, really we are trying to create and foster an online space with kids' best interests at heart, and to be a sustainable source of support to children's rights and welfare initiatives, especially related to internet and digital rights. Does anybody know what the definition of children might be? Anybody know it all here? Okay, so for DotKids, we are really basing a lot of our guidelines. Next, please. Under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And in this convention, which is the most signed signatory instrument for us in the world, it defines children as those under 18. And for the kids' guiding principles, we take a lot of it from this document. And you can see here, there's 4 particular bullets that we want to concentrate on. It is the children's right to protection, children's right to privacy, children's right to survival, and children's right to freedom of expression. To give you a little bit of idea what the very first one means, because it seems quite broad, it is protection from unsavory content, from things that are illegal, from gambling, from tobacco, from, things that are not age appropriate for children. And if we're looking at the right to privacy, the second bullet point there is, we've been talking a lot about data privacy, right to privacy in general at APrIGF. Children too have a right to privacy. The third one, the children's right to survival. This would be content, that the right to not have to see content that would promote the taking of life, of suicide, and so on. And of course, the last one is quite self-explanatory. The right to the freedom of expression, that they are able to post what they are thinking, learn, grow, and explore. Next one. And also, besides, trying to be prohibitive of things, we also want to encourage content that is kids-friendly, children-friendly, to grow on this particular internet namespace. And there's a kids-friendly content guide that we require registrants, those who take by these domains, to adhere to. And it is non-discrimination, it is marketing and advertising, especially in relation to children. We have to be particularly sensitive that it is not exploiting them, that we're not trying to push any kind of unsavory or inappropriate materials or inappropriate services to children. It is content categorization. For kids, you know, there's a sliding range when we're talking about, you know, a child could be anywhere from, you know, 0, of course, all the way to 18. And the appropriateness of content really does change as the child ages. And then when we go to security, policy development, and children participation, this is really talking about the policies that govern this namespace. We have partnered for over 10 years with a lot of child rights organizations and initiatives and welfare initiatives to look at what really is best for children in terms of protection, but as well as allowing them the freedom to express themselves, which brings me to the point where we look at children participation. I think you've heard a lot about representation in this APrIGF. So we want to hear from children themselves what they want to see in the namespace. We don't want to be too prescriptive, and we want to allow them the freedom to be able to express themselves on this namespace. And then finally, multi-stakeholder participation and collaboration. All of you here in the room in Singapore as well as online, you are part of our multi-stakeholder. It's not only children, it's not only technical community, it's not only child rights welfare organizations, but also all of you. You are part of the multi-stakeholder collaborative efforts, and we really want to hear from you what you think. I don't want to waste too much time on these, you know, quite serious bullets here. We really want to hear also from our guests. Maybe next slide. I'd like to introduce to you our guest speakers who are next to me in the room. First, right next to me, we have Jessie Lee. She is from Meta, and she's a public policy manager on content regulation. She is based here in Singapore. Online, we have Jutta Croll, and she is a chairwoman and project manager for Stiftung Digitale Chancen, and she is based in Germany. Thank you, Jutta, for joining us online. I know it's very early for you in Germany, so thank you for you participating with us as well. And then finally, next to Jessie, we have Stella To. She is our youth delegate, and maybe you've heard her speak already in APrIGF. She is part of NetMission.Asia, and she's also affiliated with ISOC Malaysia. So I really want to ask Jessie about what it is for Meta. What are the important things that we need to look out for? How is the content policy and content regulation, especially in terms of content targeted at children, how is that governed? How is the framework, and also, you know, is there any kind of difficulties when you're looking at this with takedowns, and also the policies that govern this? Jessie.
Testing. Okay, it works. Testing. Thank you, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Jessie, and I work on the safety policy team here at Meta. And issues that we look after include child safety, women's safety, human exploitation, suicide and self-injury, a whole bunch of, you know, unsavory online content that we don't want our children to be exposed to. And I think I would start with just giving a broad overall frame of the different issues or different buckets that we think about when we talk about online safety related to children. So I think for me, this manifests in 3 key ways. One, of course, from the types of content that children are exposed to online, and 2, from the types of content that they are creating online, which could then put them at danger, and 3, in terms of the people that they're interacting with on our platforms that could be potentially dangerous or inappropriate. And of course, these 3 buckets are not mutually exclusive, and they could mutually reinforce each other. You know, if you look at a lot of bad content, that could then influence you to produce bad content, and then that could lead bad actors to look for you. So I think it's a very complex interplay of factors. And here at Meta, we use a combination of our policies, our product tools and features, and also programs and resources to ensure that all these different aspects of safety are looked after. And our community standards that I would start talking about is essentially the set of policies that we have that govern what content is and is not allowed on our platforms. And this applies to all of our users as a baseline, including children. So things that are prohibited on the platform includes content related to child sexual exploitation, the worst of the worst, and also nudity-related content, adult sexual exploitation, bullying and harassment, hate speech, so on and so forth. And on top of our baseline community standards, we then go a step further to restrict certain types of content that could be okay for the general public, but we do not want children below the age of 18 to see. And examples of this could be violent and graphic content, because we know that children could not be developmentally ready to deal with this content, and also with overt sexualized content, for example. Suicide and self-injury related content are all what we consider as a group of mature themes that we might not want our children to be exposed to. And so traditionally, prohibition and restriction are what we think about. But as we move into the future, we also think about recommendation. So that will be the next trench of what we are interested to look at. And for this, what I really talk about is, while there are content that could be okay on the platform, if we are recommending it by our algorithms, we are pushing it directly to the user without them indicating that they want to see it, then we need to have an even stricter set of policies in place in terms of thinking, is this some type of content that I want to actively recommend to users? And this is what we consider as borderline content. And one example that I can give to the group here is in terms of eating disorders content. And this is one group of content that is, very dangerous for youths to be actively exposed to, especially in large amounts, because when, children are growing up, they struggle with body image issues, and being overtly exposed or recommended to this type of content is something that we want to avoid on our platforms. And so I think that's on the policy side of the house, and I can also give an example of how we think about our product design, making it safer for children from the get-go. And so I think when we design our products and features, we think about it with children in mind in terms of age-appropriate design, and how can we protect them from the first place. So we have introduced privacy by default settings for young people on our platforms. And so today, if you are the youth signing up for a new account on Instagram, for example, and if you are below the age of 16, your account will be automatically set to private by default. And this then offers you an additional layer of protection in terms of the content that you're creating, putting out there. Maybe only a close circle of friends are able to see it. And also having a private account would then protect you from being approached by other bad actors that might, have bad intentions. And lastly, in terms of interactions, just to touch very quickly on that, we also put in place friction to prevent bad actors from looking for young people on the platform. So we look at signals. For example, if you have had other minor children accounts report you for inappropriate behavior, then we might put an additional layer of friction to prevent you from reaching other children on the platform. So these are all examples of how Meta is taking a comprehensive multi-pillar approach to children's online safety.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Jessie, for the very comprehensive summary of what Meta is doing. I am mindful of the time, and I'm mindful, of course, time from Jutta, who has joined us from Germany. Jutta, can you tell us a little bit more about, probably the situation in Europe as well as probably globally, and your work that you are doing with children's rights, children's digital rights. Thank you, Jutta.
Yes, of course, I'm happy to do so. So as you see from my background, I'm working for an organization that is advocating children's rights, and especially in the digital environment. Things that we are doing are now that we have the General Comment number 25 to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, on children's rights in relation to the digital environment. We base everything on that. And as you may know, the General Comment was published by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child last year in March, I think. And it requires a lot of the states that have ratified the UNCRC, especially in regard of protecting children, but also in regard of ensuring their rights to freedom of expression, for example, as you have said before. We think that what the General Comment says in regard of creating safe spaces for children, it's an obligation for the states to create the frameworks for safe spaces for children, but also an obligation for the platform providers, as we have heard before from Jessie and from Meta. But how can we do that? It's not an easy task. It's very complex because the risks that may come along for children when being in the digital environment are huge. We are talking about abuse of children, about child sexual abuse material spread on the internet. We are talking about grooming. All these risks are definitely there, and so it's necessary to create such safe spaces. We do think that DotKids provides for a unique opportunity to create a safe space for children, of course, and children will be attracted to any service that is on DotKids, of course, any platform that they will find there. But we need to be aware that also if we create such a playground, it's like in real world, a playground will also attract potential perpetrators to children, and we need to ensure that the space is still kept safe for children. So that means we need respective safeguards that make sure that children have the appropriate content in this safe space and that they are protected from inappropriate content and especially from inappropriate interaction with people that might be perpetrators to them. What we need to be aware of is that any restriction we put on a safe space and to children's access to communication and access to information, access to other users, that will also have an impact on their rights to freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. So we need a balanced approach. And that is also the main discussion that we have right now, as we have asked for Europe. In Europe, with the new EU regulation, the draft regulation that is underway, the big discussion is whether we can ensure that, on the one hand, all these rights to freedom of expression of all users, the right to privacy of all users can be balanced with the right to protection for children. Thank you.
Thank you, Jutta, for the comprehensive look at Europe as well as globally on what is being done. It is always a fine balance to see appropriate safeguards and protection, as well as upholding the children's right to freedom of expression and, of course, using the internet in a way that benefits their potential and growth. I want to swing back to Asia a little bit and also talk to our Gen Z participants. We're going to come to Stella. Stella, what is, online safety to you, especially your generation who are digital natives? What is that to you? What do you hope to see in this space?
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Sorry for that. So I believe that for Gen Z, the reason why that we were included in this dialogue, which we appreciate, is because we are kind of in the transition phase. We're transitioning out of being acknowledged as children and moving on to perhaps bigger responsibilities. And when it comes to our relation as to why there's perhaps a new perspective, is because we are more aware of some things that we want to explore. We're also given more freedom in a sense. And some parents may also feel like once you reach a certain age, they do feel like the responsibility is now passed on to the individual as individual youth, as opposed to how they feel about children. I'd like to also just comment on some things that I've seen in the process of preparing for the workshop proposal, which we also helped work with to bring it to IGF 2022 this year, is that for DotKids, I do note that it is allowed for parents to register under DotKids. And so something that we have seen, Gen Z, is that there has been a kind of prevalence in cases where parents are using their kids for clout. So they're using their kids to kind of stay relevant in a way. And I do believe that this needs to be discussed, because safeguards for this should be something that DotKids might want to consider, especially since you'll be acknowledging and giving them that. Another thing I'd also like to highlight is that Meta also, Jessie mentioned earlier about looking at policies kind of in a general sense, but I do want to highlight that cultural differences across the world can result in different ways the parent and child relationship is perceived. So I would highlight that in Asia, parent and child relationship may be considered more one way, and it could result in issues of trying to get effective communication. So Jennifer also mentioned earlier, we want to see representation of children in this multi-stakeholder dialogue, but it may be hard to see this kind of happen, and I'd like to hear perspectives on how you believe that you can ensure the localization so it's relevant to the culture and context of that particular country, as well as representation of the children.
Thank you. Thank you, Stella. That is actually very important for us in Asia-Pacific region. There's a lot of cultural sensitivities and differences, even within our own region. There's a lot of, I guess, tradition, as well as things that I've learned from, previous generations, that it is still quite difficult for young people and especially children to really speak up and speak their mind. And we really hope this is an opportunity for them to be able to express themselves freely. I do want to open the floor now, actually, to Q&A. I know we only have half an hour. I want to reserve at least a third of the time to hear from people in the room and also online. So online participants, we haven't forgotten about you. If you have comments or questions, please put it in the chat or raise your hand, use your raise hand icon. And people in the room, please feel free to also come up to the mic and, ask your questions, because this is something that we should all be concerned about, because children are vulnerable, but we still want to give them the freedom and space to be able to use the internet in a way that benefits their growth. Anybody from the audience? I promise you that there will be prizes for people who actually come and ask. I see one that is coming up.
Hello, I'm Jaewon from Korea, and I have a question that, in some specific countries, I feel like it is being censored to say what you want to say and then how you use the internet. And because it's a government regulation, there's nothing much that I felt like they can try to change it unless they go out of the country. So for this measure, how do you think we can try to help them having a freedom of using the internet as they are? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jaewon. Is that a question you wanted to direct specifically to anybody in the panel or just in general?
Okay, I can give a stab at it first. So I think government regulation is one of those iron hammer things where, even us as a business, we have to comply with. Otherwise, it's you don't comply and you're out of the country kind of thing. But I think the approach that we try to take here at Meta in terms of helping and informing regulators on what is the ideal way that they can go about thinking about regulation is in terms of engaging them from the very start of policy development. And sometimes regulators do actively reach out to us because they might not be fully aware of all the difficulties and challenges that's involved with online content regulation. And by educating them from the very beginning on the watch-outs that they have, on the international guidelines, principles that we should watch out and keep in mind when they are making their regulation, I think this helps us to land in a much better place eventually when the actual regulation or the law is passed.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Jessie. Jutta, did you want to add to it?
Yes, I think it's a very difficult question. As you said before, we also have to take into account the cultural differences in the various regions of the world and also in the various countries. Of course, we know that in many countries, these repressive actions are undertaken by governments and by states. And so freedom of expression is not guaranteed, not only for young people, but for the population at large. On the other hand, in some cases, we need some restrictions to be able to cope with hate speech, with fake information, and also with child sexual abuse material that should not be spread across the internet. So it's a very difficult thing to find the balance, not to be restrictive to freedom of expression, but still to keep under control all this unwanted content and this unhealthy content on the internet.
Thank you, Jutta. Yes, always the question and the consideration of balancing well. I think there was a question from the floor. Yes, Gaia?
Sorry, I had perhaps a similar question, but how do you deal with striking the balance between sexual exploration or sexual health information that children today want to access versus kind of sanitizing the environment, perhaps taking it too far? So how do you go about, where does your understanding lie around that?
Thank you, Gaia, for the question. This is always a really good question because we want to protect them, but we also want to educate them. And I think, at least I can speak at least from the DotKids Foundation point of view, we do have categories of materials that are completely prohibited, but there are certain categories where if it is in an educational material sense, right? If we're in school, there is of course sex ed, and there is also, history lessons. When in history, you learn a lot about very violent wars and things that are quite horrific in human history. So if it is in an appropriate educational context, I think this is something that is beneficial for the growth of children, as well as, on a sliding scale as well. What is appropriate for somebody, a child at 5 may not be, if you're a child at 15, that sliding scale goes back up, and the information given to a child at 15 would be different. Hopefully that is helpful. I don't know if anybody wants to add to this. Yes, Jutta.
Yes, I do think that especially at that point, we, of course, with the huge amount of content, we rely on artificial intelligence and algorithms to define what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. But still, we need to improve in this matter, because the grade between the unhealthy content and the content necessary to keep the health of young people is very small. So I do think we need to train the algorithms better. We need to train artificial intelligence better to decide whether it's the one category or the other category. And then in the end, in some cases, we still need a human making the decision whether the content is provided to young people or whether it should not be provided to young people.
Thank you, Jutta. Thank you for bringing up a really important point of AI assisting with combating this content, as well as, of course, the human element, where we also have to see if the AI is correct or not. I see there's more hands up on the floor. If you can actually stand up right behind the mic, I can see who is first and second. Please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm James from the Philippines. I would like to ask, what are the safety nets of your initiatives pertaining to the security and privacy for the children, especially they are using the digital space, knowing that what they see, they do?
Thank you, James. I'll take the last question, and then, because we're running out of time, and then we'll try to answer all of it at once.
Okay, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I'm Kaushalya Gupta. I'm from the World Wide Web Foundation, usually from India. My question is to Jessie. I'm really glad that you mentioned age-appropriate design, because most of the conversations usually focus on content and not design aspects. And we've seen that terms and conditions are not very accessible to young people, especially children. And so I just want to know, what are the ways in which we could actually make them more readable, understandable? Because often we find that terms and conditions lead to shady data harvesting without kids knowing. So my question is for everyone, but thanks for mentioning that.
So thank you for the question. I haven't forgotten prizes, by the way. Those who have spoken up, please come to me after this session. I will answer quite briefly because we only have a minute and a half left. The question about, what are the policies, security and privacy for DotKids namespace? I mean, I'm going to do a small plug here. Go to DotKids, dot.kids. There you will find a very comprehensive set of registry policies that govern the internet namespace. I assure you there is very stringent implementation of this, even more so than regular top-level domains. So of course CSAM is a completely prohibited category of content, and there are other contents which I have talked about a little earlier in the presentation that we do look out for, we do ban, and we do take down when we see this category of content. I'm going to pass the time over to Jessie to answer the last question.
Super quick answer from me. So we do try to make all these materials, including terms of use, safety features, community guidelines, whatever, etc., more sexy and more digestible in a short format for younger audiences. And so this might be in the form of either creating short form digital videos or images assets ourselves, or we might collaborate with some of the popular creators who are out there who have a wider reach among youth, and then see what creative ideas they can then come up with to sort of share their own experiences and to help educate our audiences on our policies and features.
Thank you so much, Jessie, and thank you, Jutta, for joining us from Germany. Thank you, Stella, for being with us as well. Thank you for all your great questions. I know we're running out of time, but those who have put up your hand and come up to the questions, come up to me to the stage after this session for your little prize. Thank you so much for your time.